get there, open up the door. He said, that crazy thing you told me to do with their juicing, almost killed me. I got rushed to the hospital because of that. He said, I'm so sorry, I can't figure out what happened, and I'm never going to tell anyone about this again. And I was really curious, but I was sincere, and I didn't want to do this. And then he said, but I don't have colitis anymore. I said, wait a second, it worked. I'm going to tell everyone about this. He said, no. I got rushed to the hospital. They said it was the worst case they'd ever seen. They blamed it on the juice and whatever else he was doing, of just one day of juicing even. And that's what they said, and they had to take his colon out. And now I said, now I'm really sorry. I'm never going to tell anyone about this again because I can't imagine what went wrong, but obviously something did, and I'm not going to talk about the raw food diet ever again. And I wasn't planning to ever talk about it again. I was leaving the hospital room that day. I asked him one more question that changed my life forever. I said, out of curiosity, what juice did you fast with? His answer, Gatorade. What fresh, glow-in-the-dark blue fruits can glow-in-the-dark blue fruit juice? It's not out yet. I hear they're working on it, but I said, forget about teaching people about the raw diet. I got to teach people that Gatorade is not fresh juice. People just don't understand this. They don't know. I know people that come up to me today and they still think like bread is raw because it's cold. They have no idea. So I said, now I got to teach this, and that's just the beginning. And the story goes on and on, but I want to get right into this evening's teaching, which is the Daylight Diet, the book behind me. Basically, what I did from there, I opened up. I didn't open it. I became a chef at one of the world's biggest raw food restaurants, vegetarian restaurants in New York City, making raw food on the menu there. And then I went to go on to have my own restaurant, which was the world's biggest raw food restaurant to ever be opened in New York City, and which is important because we have the world's biggest people in New York City. And I went there, and I was doing that. And in the process, I interviewed people who eat a raw food diet from all over the world. And that was the result of this book. I interviewed a whole bunch of different people eating a raw food diet, and some of those people today, many years later, are still thriving. Some of those people today aren't even alive. The raw food diet alone by itself is not a panacea. I wanted to write another book, which was Raw Knowledge, and more interviews with people being this way. Then I wrote a book about inflammatory bowel disease. I do not have all my books back here today, but next time I'll have them all, and I'll send them to Radu, and you can get them through him. He'll have them as well, and you can get them from my sites. But then I kept writing some books. Then I wrote a book. I used to love to study books from the 1800s, because now it seems everyone's into health to just sell something. You don't have to spend $5,000 to drink healthy water, and you don't have to step inside some machine to avoid cancer. Everyone's trying to sell something today, but back in the 1800s, when people wanted to do something that was about health, it was very simple. Eat the real superfoods of nature, the fruits and the vegetables. That's it. It wasn't about doing all this other stuff, doing all these other things. I'm going to give you information here tonight that's free, simple, easy to apply, and it works. You might not feel you're getting such a great value from it because you're not spending a lot of money for it, but at least you can afford to do it and see how great it is. So that's what you're going to get tonight. And then when I studied this book from the 1800s, I ran into a book by a fellow named Arnold Ehret. And that book was called The Mucosaless Diet Healing System. And Arnold Ehret was an author that came in the early 1900s to the United States from Germany. And in Germany, the doctors gave up on him and told him his life was going to end because he was so sick with Bright's disease and kidney disease and all these other issues. He went and created this thing called the Mucosaless Healing Diet, or the Mucosaless Healing System. Wrote a book about it. Went on to write many other books. Amazing books, great books. But in all those books, he has something called The Formula for Life. So I went and made another book called The Formula for Health, which we're going to talk a little about, based on his formula for life. So we're going to talk a little about that, but basically, we have to understand when it comes to the formula for life, that if you apply this formula, regardless of what you do, regardless of what you're eating, regardless of how you're eating, if you apply this formula, you're going to understand health. And it's going to help you to achieve it. Then after that, I kept reading and writing and so on. I was at a lecture, and there was a fellow in the crowd after my talk who said, Paul, your book is the second greatest health book I've ever read. And I said, well, what's the first? He goes, not only will I tell you, but I'll give you a copy on two reasons, on two promises, or two conditions. I said, well, what are they? He said, the first condition is, before you develop an opinion about the book, you read the whole book. I said, well, how can I develop an opinion about the book unless I read the whole book? He said, well, some people have a habit of just skimming through the book and they say, know what it says and everything else. I said, no, sir, if you say this book's the greatest health book ever written, I want to know about it and I want to see what it has to say. What's the next thing? He goes, if you disagree that this isn't the greatest health book ever written, you give it back to me. But if you agree, you let other people know about it. Well, I hardly doubted it would be anywhere close to as good as my book because I was getting humble. But I said I'd give the book a try. And I read the book, and I really read it to search about health, and he proved me wrong. This was by far, had more information than any other health book I have ever read in my life. That book was the Bible. And I was so upset. Because many years prior to that, when I was sitting in the doctor's office, somebody tried to tell me the same thing, and I said, no, thank you. And I would have saved myself years of pain and suffering if I would have read it back then. Of all the hundreds of health books I've read up to that point, none of them had the complete information. I mean, it spoke about the fruits and vegetables being the food for our body. It spoke about not only that, but it said how much, how often, and when we should eat the food. It also spoke about the other non-dietary habits of health and all this. And I'll go to tell you, no matter what belief system you come from around the world, every belief system that promotes longevity will agree from a diet standpoint what the Bible teaches about health and diet. So I was amazed by this. So then I went to write a book called Health According to the Scriptures. And as I was doing this and doing all these studies and everything else, somebody told me, they said, you know what, well, the Bible doesn't only tell us what to eat and what to eat it, but, and how much to eat, but also it tells us the best times to eat our food. And I said, I think I missed out one. Let me read it again. So I kept reading it and learning and thumbing and everything else. And very well, it does say the ideal times to be eating our food. You know, we were designed to eat a certain food in a certain amount, in a certain way, at a certain time. You got people living so far against what that way was. We have more money, science, knowledge, and disease than ever before in the history of man. But at the same time, we have more people suffering from disease than ever before in the history of man. But what's the connection? You have more people living against the way we were designed to live. They're almost doing the complete opposite than ever before in the history of man. Let me just start off by saying the ideal time to eat our food. When we can see it. Nobody would sit in a dark room and be hungry, but you turn on a light, all of a sudden people think they're hungry because they see food. You know, the only animals in nature that were created to eat at nighttime were nocturnal animals. Last I checked, we're not that. But what do we do in our great human intelligence? We go to a brand new restaurant and we turn down the lights and call it romantic. That's not romantic, it's unhealthy. Food does not digest the same way in the dark. You know, every major belief system around the world that promotes health and longevity will agree the body works in cycles. There's a time for digestion, assimilation, and cleansing. And if you eat according to the design and schedule that we were meant to live by, we're going to thrive and have the greatest health. If you go opposite, you might survive, but you're not going to thrive. Just because you're surviving is not the answer. People go, well, I've been eating at nighttime my whole life and I feel fine. Well, just because you're doing something doesn't mean it's right, especially when you find out you shouldn't be doing it. The body has an amazing power to survive and adapt to its situation, but that doesn't mean it's best. For example, everything in nature was created this way. Let's say you take a plant. You go to any florist and you see these beautiful plants in their shops. What they have done is they've taken the plants out of their unnatural environment, put them in this, out of their natural environment, put them in this unnatural environment, but they try to mimic the natural environment, and the plant will survive, but it won't thrive ever as it would in its natural environment. Well, the same thing is for our body. We can try to mimic daylight with these lights and everything else. We can try to mimic all these different foods from nature and everything else, but we will never thrive as well as if we did living on the schedule we were designed to live by. The number one disease that's out there today that goes misdiagnosed is adrenal fatigue. Adrenal fatigue is partly because we're living so far against the schedule we were designed to, eating our biggest meals at the end of the day, going to sleep on a heavy stomach, eating the majority of our food when it's dark outside, when it's really our body should be cleansing, doing it completely backwards in what we should be doing. We should be eating the biggest meal in the beginning of the day so we have the whole day to work it off, and going to sleep on an empty stomach. But people aren't even going to sleep at the right time. Forget about eating at the right time. People say, Paul, where in the Bible does it say we should be eating our food, you know, in the daytime? If God wanted us to eat our food at nighttime, He would have made fruits and vegetables glow in the dark on a tree. He didn't do that. You know, we're built a certain way. You could have the same salad at noontime and the same salad at 9 o'clock at night. It's not going to digest the same way. What it comes down to custom versus culture. or custom and culture versus design. You have custom versus design. See, design